So as a person, as a part of venture capital firm, you get to participate in deals that regular people have been excluded from for a while. Like there were rules set up saying, hey, if you're not a certain type of investor, you don't have a certain amount of money, you don't have a certain amount of income, you're not allowed to invest in those companies. I only remember this from rules I heard maybe 10 years ago, but I also remember people were saying these are changing. What is the state of play right now as far as regular people being able to invest in companies?
You can do a specific type of offering to the masses, but it never really, Obama administration papered it, and it was meant to allow everyone to get into venture capital. It's a really dangerous space, and you can lose your money easily because everything. Here's an example. So I'm a tech investor, and at the Archangels meetings.
What is Archangels?
So it's a group in St. Louis. It's like 100 members, and they just all sign up and sign a waiver that says, I'm an accredited investor. I want to come see pitches, but I'm making investments on my own account. I'm not getting advice from the group. It's a nonprofit, but it was just meant to be an audience for entrepreneurs to pitch, to accredited investors. And when I first started going to these meetings, the deals I loved were the ones I knew nothing about. So guy gets up, he's got a cancer drug, and I'm like, I'm in. This is awesome, And then the tech guy gets up and gives his pitch, and I'm like, this is the worst deal I've ever seen. But guess who in the room was all in, raising their hands? The doctors. Guess who didn't put a dime into the cancer drug?
The doctors.
So I started talking to these guys. When I would love a deal, a life science deal, I'd say, is this a good deal? And they're like, this is technology that's been around for 30 years. It's never been adopted. The FDA doesn't like it. I've actually participated in the trials. Like these guys would have all this knowledge. I'm like, oh, wow, you just saved me 50 grand. Thanks. But then they started asking me about the tech deals. They'd be like, this is amazing. It's going to take over your whole calendar and da, 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, there's 10 of these companies out there that have raised 50 million bucks. Like this guy's not going to beat them. And they're like, oh, I didn't know those were out there. I said, yeah, they're going to raise 50 million bucks. Your 50 grand is going to be worth nothing in 2 years. So that helps.
This reminds me of the Gelman amnesia effect, which is it's describing, you open up the newspaper and you read an article about something you know a lot about. Like I know a lot about glyphosate and Roundup and those things. And you're like, this author has no idea what they're talking about. What a garbage article. And then you turn the page and you've completely forgotten that they didn't know anything about a subject you knew a lot about. And then you're like, oh, they're telling me about the military now. I'm going to believe every word in here.
You got it. You know John Jennings?
No.
Are you from St. Louis?
No, I moved here about 9 years ago.
God, if you want to do these with the most interesting guy in the world, he's upstairs. He's the president of St. Louis Trust Company. And he does the iFod, the interesting fact of the day. He's in my YPO forum. And this guy's read more books than any human being on the planet. And he gets interested in stuff, and he just does a deep dive on whatever the subject is. And he writes a 5-minute read. And when he doesn't do it every day, he just does it when he's done something, but he's got, 600 of these things on his website, and they're all super fun reads. He did that one that you just mentioned. He just studies stuff and writes about it. But his day job is he runs this multifamily office. But he'd be a fascinating guy to talk about not any specific, well, you can talk about any specific things, but just the quest for knowledge. He'd be an amazing podcast guy. Just as an aside, if you want an intro. But yeah, the venture capital space, people think you just put money in and you get, 100 times your money back. You lose money fairly frequently. My job is to try to not lose money And at my stage, like I got wiped out as an angel on several deals because of dilution and because of the Series A, B, C, sometimes D, all has preference, and people don't understand there's different types of securities.
So explain that. When you talk about this, how does somebody get diluted out of making a profit?
So, I mean, you could do it a number of different ways, but when you have a good idea for, blowing this podcast globally, and you're going to get all this amazing talent, and you're going to pay them a bunch of money, like Quibi. Think Quibi. They blew $2 billion in 6 months. They pitched us in this office. We patched. We said, "You're dead in the water." Meg Whitman. So we were right. I don't ever like seeing a failure, by the way, because I just love startups. But if you go into your podcast and you go to your parents and your fraternity brothers and your old boss, say, "I'm going to blow this thing out. I need $500,000. A lot of times it's getting better now because NVCA sort of educated the world on venture capital, but it used to be you go buy a bunch of common stock. Common stock has no rights. So then all of a sudden you start spending that money, you start getting success, you start getting talent, and Joe Buck's doing one, and you're starting to get a bunch of good names that are doing your podcast. And then you go out and raise institutional money. You go for your Series A. They come in and say, "Okay, well, you're doing pretty well. We think you're worth $10 million, and we're going to give you $2 million, but we're going to put a preference on it. There's a liquidation preference. There can be dividends on that. You can have participating preferred, which means when it sells, you get all your money back. Then it converts to common with everyone else. So you might be selling 10% of the business, but it's not really, because the cash comes out and then it's 10% of the business. Then the Series B comes in. They adopt the same rights as the Series A, and they put $10 million into the business. They're getting that 10 back. Then they go to common. The A's getting their 2 back, going to common. And all of a sudden, the founder, where you thought you had, 40% of your business, they took all the cash. And I'm not saying it's not fair, because it's downside risk is what they're managing. My job's not to lose my investors' money. So I put protections in there. So, if you go nuts or go AWOL or go to the Bahamas or whatever, like if we liquidate this thing, I'm going to get my money back before the common gets anything. But if you were that first seed investor and you bought common, you just got nuked. What if the scrap value of this thing's $10 million? This is what's happening at Quibi. They're parting that thing out and they're getting tens of millions of dollars. So $1 billion just went up in flames. But if you have preference in the stack, you're going to get paid before the next guy down the ladder and the next guy. So that early investor, you think, I'm going to make 100 times my money. And a lot of times it doesn't shake out that way. But the number of investors that don't even understand that's why doing the big Obama era Reg D offerings where you don't have to be an accredited investor, it's really dangerous. We don't play in that space. We're institutional. All of our LPs are accredited investors, and we don't do deals that are raising money that way.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.